And today's theme is strike a pose. So, strike on over your best pose that you have. And welcome again. So, first things first, before we start, I just want to do a quick reminder so that we get things out of the way. We have the unmute button. If you would like to talk, participation is, of course, encouraged. So you can either unmute or mute your mic. And if we can ask, please, if y'all can keep your mics muted for the meantime when you're not talking, just so we can kind of limit the amount of static noise that we hear. Also, another way that you can participate is through our chat feature. So if you see over there, there's a chat little button, and all you're going to do is click that, and that will send on over a message in the chat in which our wonderful hostess, Johanna, will be able to take care of for you. So Johanna, you want to say hi to everyone for us today?
Hey everyone. So yeah, I'll be communicating your questions from the chat to Mark, and also just throwing in my 2 cents when I get a chance. So yeah, I'm happy that everyone's here.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Johanna. I really appreciate it. She is our wonderful chat overlord, and we'll do everything which we can to make sure that y'all's questions and y'all's comments get heard. And yeah, so let us begin. So as we do throughout all of our happy hour tours, and what we've been trying to get into the habit of doing is we've been trying to get into the habit of just looking at this piece of artwork, and based on our topic that we have started with of striking a pose, try to figure out what it is that we're going to talk about. But just look at this figure, and I want you to tell us what it is that you see. So spend about 15, 20 seconds, and then we'll get back to y'all, and we'll talk a little bit about what it is we're seeing.
Seeing the Egyptian shadow, statue of this Egyptian shadow that is just as it enters that line.
Yeah. So.
Ben is saying, is it a woman? Another person, I think that's Chris, seated with power. Gretchen said a monkey's face, question mark. So maybe there's some confusion on what this figure is.
Yeah, of course. So first and foremost, we're looking at this, and we noticed it's some sort of humanoid figure. We know that it's a figure because we're able to distinguish whether it be the 2 legs, the 2 arms, but then we heard somebody say the head. Somebody said monkeys, someone said it was something different. And what this in fact is this is Sekhmet. She is the Egyptian goddess of war. And in fact, she is a lion-headed goddess. Are we able to see that reference of a lion's head?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. We can see kind of like the lioness mane, excuse me. We can see kind of like her nose being pronounced. And I want us to think about, why might the artist have made this? What was the purpose for this? Why is it done in this fashion? Do we have any ideas on that one? I mean, it's a fairly loaded question, but do you have any ideas?
The pose, as some people have said, is a pose of authority.
Very much so. Mm-hmm.
And if it was part of their religion, a worship item in their religion, possibly?
Yeah, very much so. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're talking about the pose? The pose is very interesting. Why do you say it's a pose of authority?
Up on a pedestal, but also very still. This figure has no need to be aggressive because this figure has power.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, definitely. She like imposes the sense of authority, of power, and without doing anything. And I think that also, speaks to the power in which she has. Because if we can think about, somebody who has to show like how, whether it be powerful they are, they're always in movement, versus Sekhmet here, she automatically is given that authority. It's as though, you know, nobody wants to go up to her and, you know, do anything. She's just there and she's showing us who she is. What else? What else can we say about her here? I don't know if you were trying to talk, Sally, you have to unmute your mic, I think, and that might help.
She looks formidable.
Can you say that once more? I'm sorry.
Formidable.
Formidable. And explain to us what you mean by that. How does she look formidable to you?
She's boss.
She's the boss. Yeah. Once again, you know, speaking to I think it was Sherry's comment about how she has that authoritative figure. How, you know, when we see her, we automatically kind of give her that respect which she demands. And I think that's very interesting, and it also speaks to who Sekhmet was as a goddess.
Who was she as a goddess?
So she was, in fact, Ra's daughter, and Ra is the sun god. So Sekhmet was a little bit on the kind of furious side, and she was the goddess of war.
Of what?
Of war.
Okay.
Yeah. So she was very, you know, over the top. She had a lot of energy. In different, you know, Egyptian stories, she has been known to, you know, cause a lot of turmoil, similar to, you know, Greek and Roman mythology.
Ben was wondering if there's something around her neck.
Oh, okay. So right here.
Or maybe what's kind of coming over her shoulder, or no, you are talking about that kind of like little crack thing.
Yes. So I would say, I mean, of course, you know, these being almost 3,000 or a little over 3,000 years, excuse me. I would say things have kind of, you know, brittled down throughout time. And I think I don't know if there was anything around her neck. I know that we can say the thing around her shoulders would have in fact been kind of like a crown that the Egyptians would wear, but it could be possible that there was in fact something around her neck, because we've seen in other types of Egyptian rulings that they would have these sort of necklaces which were very pronounced, just to, you know, show status, to show power, and if they would have some sort of religious connotation as well to them.
Mm-hmm.
So, any other questions? Do we have any other comments? I wish we were in the galleries, because one of the most interesting things actually when looking at this is how large Sekhmet's feet are. She has very, very elongated feet. And this is something that we see throughout time, and it's also pronounced in fingers as well. I know during the Akhenaten time period of Egyptian rule, fingers were very much elongated, and they kind of had like this alien-like fingers. And then even throughout the Renaissance times in painting, you also see these elongated fingers. So it's always interesting to look. And once we are able to venture back into the galleries, we can have a look at her feet, and they are enormous. And it makes us wonder, why would the sculptor want to give Sekhmet such large feet? Anyone know? Does anyone have any ideas to that?
Well, didn't most of the statuaries all have large feet?
Yeah, that's actually true. I can agree. But why would they do that? Is there meaning behind the large feet?
Is it because Ben's asking so people can rub the feet?
I don't know.
I don't know. That's a really interesting idea, because, you know, at first I heard it and was like, well, no, they can't possibly. But it might be some sort of spiritual connection, if you think about it, is the feet being the grounding point of the statue. And it's like as though the figure Sekhmet is not or the goddess Sekhmet is not necessarily in the statue, but has some sort of connection to the statue, and maybe rubbing the feet will give you some sort of connection to her. But I don't know. That's completely off the limb.
We also have from Jamin, if I remember, to make her seem less human. Is that potentially why?
I would very much agree with you on that one. Definitely. She does have human characteristics, but she is different enough than humans and different enough than us to know, so that we as a people can know that she is more powerful than us. And I think definitely it does give her that continual sense of authority, the sense of the other world, also that she is just above all of us.
Deborah said that the large feet indicate the person is very tall, which then indicates power from height.
Yeah, from statue as well, definitely. And I mean, Sekhmet as well was, I remember there were certain things that really symbolized who she was. So yeah, definitely. Also maybe to symbolize the length of her. I got another one to show you.
I have a question.
Yes, please. Yes, Sally.
Is Sekhmet a lion with the body of a woman, or is she a woman with the head of a lion?
So she is a woman with the head of a lion.
Mm-hmm.
So as we can see here, this would have all been, you can see kind of like the lion's nose right there. There's the eyes, the mane, and then the body, right, of the woman-like figure right there.
My question is not with respect to this particular statue, but with respect to Egyptian mythology.
Yeah.
Is it a woman or a lion?
So, well, that's an interesting question, because it'd be similar to asking, like, was Ra more man than he was falcon, or was Sekhmet more woman than she was lion? And that's an very interesting point. And I think it would depend on what she was doing, right? Mm-hmm. Because if she was in turmoil, if she was in this sense of war and of duty, what would she be better suited as a woman or as a lion?
As a lion.
As a lion, right? That's what I would interpret as well, just because the lion has that ability to be that fighter, to be that warrior, right?
Yeah. The had no power in those days, unless it had to do with a great deal of beauty.
Yeah, exactly. But then also the woman-like figure symbolizes how similar these gods and goddesses are to us. And what it does is it gives us that link. It allows us to be closer to them, and it allows us to feel like, of course, they're different than us, but we're similar, so we're able to worship them. And that it also gives a justification for different pharaohs to rule, because pharaohs would be just pretty much blessed people who could rule over different cities and different states during the times. So it just gives that signification towards
them. Chris added that lions can represent royalty.
Oh, yeah.
And, Laura said that the mane is usually seen on male lions, so that it's interesting to see it on the torso of a woman.
Yeah, that is very true. Do you think there was a reasoning for why that happened? Because I've always thought the exact same thing too.
I mean, oh, someone speak.
You can go ahead.
Okay. I was just saying, as a leader, male lion would be the person to lead their pack, even though it is the female lion who does most of the hunting.
Yeah.
So I think just to emphasize her power even more I think Egyptians would have recognized the power it is to have a lion's head, especially a male.
Yeah, just to, further represent.
Yeah, it's an African lion. It's not an Indian lion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true as well. Oh, so look at our next figure right here. This is one I always like to do a compare and contrast to, because they're very similar. They're from roughly around the same time period. However, this is a more detailed version.
Mhm.
And we're able to more pronouncedly see the lion's head right there.
Mhm.
What's interesting though, and this is a question I always like to ask, is I like to ask about the material. So on the left, we see the statue of Sekhmet, which is in a material called granodite. And it's a very dense, very durable material. What is the significance of getting a strong material?
I don't understand the word strong.
Or let's say durable or sturdy material.
Oh, all right, thank you. Give it power.
Yeah, give it power, give it long lasting.
Yeah.
Have it so that we're
Authority.
able to look at it, thousands of years later and still appreciate it. I mean, this is also to signify the power of what it is that we see.
It's feminine. The figure on the left is less feminine than the figure on the right. It wants to give more power because women had very little power in the 3000 BC.
So you're saying that the figure on the left looks less feminine than the figure?
It's less curvaceous than the one on the right.
Okay. So you're noticing the curvature right in here, I presume, and how this one isn't as curved as the figure that we see on the right. I
The right is definitely a female. The one on the left could very well be a man with large pecs.
Oh, I mean, I think we're able to tell who it is, and I'm sure there's been a lot of research and study done. That's how we're able to tell who it is. But definitely, I definitely can see your point in the sense.
What is that above Sekhmet's head on the right?
So this, in fact, it's not necessarily, it doesn't state that it is Sekhmet or not, but it is a lion-headed goddess. And this is to signify where it was in Egypt, which she ruled. So it's similar to a crown, excuse me.
Someone from the chat, Ben, also going back a little bit, that strong material is long duration, thus extending, power of Sekhmet. And then another person has mentioned that the lioness headed goddess, the one on the right, looks like a character from Lion King.
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
Oh, that's so funny. I never thought about that until now. But yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's really interesting how we're able to, make that connection, and how during those times they still would think about these figures. And even today we think about whether it be lions and different types of animals, and then it's portrayed in different types of stories and movies in which we watch, and which are, passed down through generations. So it's very interesting. There was one last final point I wanted to make with this, and that was this idea of this lioness headed goddess, in that she is made out of bronze. Bronze is a very difficult material for us to find from whether it be the Egyptian, Roman, and Greek times. And like I always do, why might it be difficult for us to find materials of bronze from that time period? Why would it be difficult? Why don't we see a lot of it?
It deteriorated? I don't know.
Didn't deteriorate. Bronze is pretty sturdy, but think about the material. What can you use bronze for, Sherry?
I don't know.
People are saying weapons in the chat, that you melt down bronze to make.
Oh.
Yeah, so bronze, right? Since people would melt things down and could make different objects out of it during times of war, it would be very necessary for these people to make weapons. And they would go about and they would end up finding these religious pieces, and they're like, well, what's more important during these times, winning the war or religious artwork? And so more times than not, they would end up having to get these bronze pieces, melting them down, and they would form some other type of purpose. So that is usually what happens, and that's why it's so difficult for us to find bronze works from those times periods.
Do you think it's possible that this statue could have been molded from melted weapons of the enemy to show that we have conquered?
Ooh, that'd be cool. I'm sure something has been done like that, and I could definitely see something like that happening. However, I don't know. I would be more likely than not say that, but it does make sense because also thinking about it now, since Sekhmet being the goddess of war, what better material to make Sekhmet out of than the weapons of your enemies? So it could be. Very interesting point, Sally. I appreciate that. Okay. Moving on to our next piece. What do we see here? Let's first take a moment and look at the left one first, the one by Regal.
Very ornate, very complicated.
Very ornate, very complicated. Why is this complicated?
He has a wig, the other one doesn't.
Okay.
He has this luscious robe, the other one doesn't. He's wearing satins and he's wearing this cravat and he's wearing medals. And he's sitting there and he's showing that the things on the table indicate what he has done to create his position. And in the back, you see the Roman columns and the drapery and so forth. And on the one on the right, you see the column.
Yeah.
But it's more Romanesque, I think, than the other one, which looks like it could be the base of a Corinthian column. And the one on the right has some draperies, but they don't shine. And the one on the right is emphasizing the flag.
Yeah.
And the paper in his hand is probably a treatise, whereas the one on the left is something could be an allocated with a medal on it, saying something that the sitter had accomplished, whereas the one on the right is something that the standing man is going to present.
Okay, wow. So Sally, you really gave us a lot there. I hear we have a lot of things from the chat.
It's been a long time. You showed me how to look.
Yeah.
I got this from visiting you.
Oh, well, thank you. That's so great. I love to hear that. That's wonderful. Thank you, Sally. Okay, what do we have from the chat, Johanna?
So from the chat, people are noticing that there's lots of red in the left work of art. They also think that the left piece has bits of classical parts in there. There's that kind of sculpture, you have this column, and that he's obviously an important guy. And then people are starting doing some compare and contrast with, European versus American leader and the more modern. But if, just from Regal's piece, it seems, what's this kind of like classical nature happening?
Yeah, for sure. I think that is something that always, stands out when we look at it. And I think, Sally did a great job picking out pretty much every single detail that we see in both of the pieces. And it really shows how much symbolism is involved in these pieces, how each specific part means something, how we're able to break it down and try to understand it, whether it be the columns and what columns represent of power, of stature, whether it be to the column or to the sculpture in the background, which has little weights on there representing justice, speaking directly to the chancellor's duty. So everything has meaning. There's always meaning, there's always symbolism, and we as art goers need or should try to take that in, should try to understand to the best of our abilities what it is that we're trying to get and how it is that the artist is able to explain those to us.
The gentleman on the left is more portly. I wonder if that's just characteristic of the times, or if that indicated some wealth. You know, he had the ability to feed himself well.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I mean, during those times, that would happen to where the more you could eat, right, would signify your wealth, which would in turn lead to that, versus the figure on the right, not so much. But also, I mean, you know, this being President James K. Polk would be a wealthy individual in himself. So that does lead a lot of questions.
There's two really interesting comments in the chat. Kathleen noticed that the left person looks more scholarly than the right person. The right person looks more political, the president. Then Sherry also mentioned that in Regal's painting that there's a lot of hard surfaces near soft textiles as like a really interesting contrast.
Oh yeah, that is
Right?
true. Yeah, definitely. Of having the hard texture of the column to the cloth, the drapery right over there. That's an interesting. I don't know if there's a direct meaning behind that, but to me, when I see the drapery, I always think of the drapery as a way to symbolize wealth. Just because of how expensive, you know, these types of draperies would have been. They would have been very luscious, and also, I mean, his robe as well, very expensive. A direct representation to wealth, to power. And similar in this. And also the color contrast as well. I mean, thinking from an artist's perspective, it would just add to the painting itself. Yes, Johanna.
I'm also going to add on that this work is 17th century, but really late. So we're talking about high Baroque art, and that's usually more extravagant in its kind of works of art. And it's also important to think about how this artist is really asking you to think about how he can render these materials, right? That he can render marble, but he can also look at fabric and make it, I mean, if you look at this man's robe, it is really technically detailed on how to make this look rich, very realistic. So I think it's kind of like a bragging a little bit that he can do these things, but then also to consider the time period of where he's coming from of extravagance.
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, that was a wonderful addition to this, Johanna. The artist would love to show off, you know, how skilled he is, right? Having that contrast, showing his abilities as a painter, and also, you know, during these times, Regal was part of the École des Beaux-Arts in France during the time. That was a very well-known art school, and only the best artists would go there. And Regal was commissioned by plenty of kings, different dukes and duchesses all over France for his skill set. And he was an extremely well-known painter. So once again, I mean, just speaking to Johanna, this was a time of opulence. This was a time to show off how rich, how powerful, just how godly we could make things. And once again, you know, speaking so much to this piece that we see here, versus in the Congis, it's not so much. It's more dull. It's more on the softer side. But if we think about it in the time period, right? This was almost done in 1700 versus the one of Polk was done in 1844. So quite a difference in time. So it's interesting to see.
Does one look important and the other one self-important?
I don't know. That's a good question. Is that how you feel?
He looks very, the one in the wig looks very content in where he is in life.
Yeah.
He's made it,
Yeah.
and he knows it.
Versus the one on the right, it's as though he's kind of looking off into the distance and he's looking for what else he can do.
He's not interested in as much in himself as he is in what he wants to I can't get the right word to project to others.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely see that. Thank you for that, Sally.
So two things to piggyback off of what Sally just said, that Sherry adds that the guy on the left occupies space versus the guy on the right looks like he's a visitor in the space. So I think that kind of goes with the level of detail and things of that nature. But then Jamin also added that in the Polk portrait that it looks like there's a map of Texas in it and which Polk helped annex. So he was just wondering if, or Jamin was wondering if that was, do we know that for sure?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so with artists, and whether it be, if you were to get a work of art commissioned by you, let's think about it in terms of that, what would be things that you would like from your own life that you would put in your portrait? So, for example, with President James K. Polk, since he did help annex Texas, that was something that was important to him. So adding that to the portrait, once again, adds to who he is. It's showing us what he's done, what is important to him. And similarly with the flag of the United States right here, it's signifying who he is. Him being a president, him just adding to that idea of who he is. The same thing with in the Regal as well. These different these different symbols, these different, whether it be papers or clothing or metals, just add to who the characters are. Just adding that symbolism.
I'm feeling nervous about that American flag on the ground.
Yeah, that is interesting. You'd be surprised like why they would do that, or why it would be kind of draped over.
Right. I wonder, when did the rules of the flag begin? I don't know.
Yeah, I
Right.
Go ahead, Johanna.
No, I was gonna ask a question, so you go for it.
No, it's just different, and it struck me at first when I first saw this. This piece is not actually on view. I've never seen it in person. I was just looking through our museum e-collection, and I thought it was a good example to add because of how similar it was to the Regal, and I thought it'd be cool. But yeah, definitely when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's interesting as to why it's kind of draped, and it does kind of hit the floor right here. But maybe during those times it wasn't the same significance or what it might be, but it's a good question.
The question that I have is, how do y'all think about the poses of these people? One person sitting down, the other standing up. How does that change the way that we interpret and feel about their power or what have you? What do you guys think?
Well, like Sally said earlier, the guy on the left, he doesn't have to stand. It's like the seated lion.
Yeah.
When you have power, you get to sit down.
Yeah. Versus the guy on the right, do you feel he has power? Does he have less power? Why isn't he sitting down?
Right, less power because he needs to stand and assert himself, whereas the Regal does not.
Is it because the one on the left is sitting on what he's accomplished and the one on the right is standing to present what he wants to accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, a combination of what y'all said about how much have each of these figures done in their life. And it's like the figure on the left, he has probably accomplished more. He seems to be older. his life is probably, coming more towards an end, versus the figure on the right is younger, has more life in him. He's going to accomplish more throughout his life period. So it's as if one is done, right? And the other one is still out there working, pretty much.
I don't know. I moved my screen around and then got the full effect of the flag on the right. And to me, the flag is more imposing and more gallant and says something than the figure itself. And then I love the Texas flag. And between the flag and the Texas flag, that has an impact on me more than the President Polk does.
Yeah, and maybe I really, that's very interesting. And maybe that's to symbolize that President Polk isn't as important as the country itself.
I love that flag. I love that flag, even though it's on the ground, but that's okay.
I mean, the detail of it and the way it drapes, is very well done.
I wonder how many stars are on that flag.
That's a good question.
How many states so far?
Yeah, right. Yeah, but these are very, very good points. And I'm glad that, we are able to look at these pieces and we're able to break down what it is we're seeing, how we're able to look at it detailed and pick out the certain symbols and what they mean to us. So, very good.
Excuse me, do we know for sure that the character on the left was royalty based on what he is wearing? Or is it possible through, say, primogeniture that he was the firstborn son and inherited all of his father's land and became very wealthy? And so these are medals that he has given himself.
Oh, that's a good question. I would say that they were earned. So Daniel Francois Vaucine was he was a chancellor. Not sure which Louis he was a chancellor for, but for him working for the government, he probably was of aristocracy, was born into aristocracy. But I feel as though he earned those medals in some sort of fashion. I wouldn't have thought they would be given.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I think that he may have been a very just person because of the scale. I did not notice the figure having the scales. I saw the figure, but I did not see the scale until it was pointed out. So he probably is, as you said, a chancellor.
But the thing is,
became a judge and goes that way.
Yeah. And I mean, I definitely agree with you on that the statue, since it being justice with the scales,
they're balanced to him.
Yeah, he probably added it in there or of course the painter added it in there to just give validation to who Daniel Francois was. But I don't know if he was a good ruler or not, to be honest. I don't know.
Do you see wealth versus simplicity?
I do definitely see that. I can. I mean, but also it's very similar to what Johanna was talking about earlier, speaking to the time period, this coming out of the Baroque versus this being done in 1844 when, you're kind of getting into Impressionism. So they're very different time periods, excuse me. And so speaking to that and the way art was done during those certain time periods,
True.
Art, has those similarities. Art always follows a certain, order and pattern. You more likely than not, you won't see something deviate so differently from one another. But very good point. Yeah, but I wanted to, I know of course that they're so far in time frames, but it's just very interesting to see these portraits, and there's so many differences, but there's so many similarities between them. Like, what are the chances? They both have columns right there. They both have those arches symbolizing, whether it be Roman power. There's both chairs, both drapery. I mean, books on the ground, books over here. some sort of documents. I mean, these are so similar from a long time frame. So it's really cool just to, you know, see them side by side.
And the use of red.
Yes, right. But red also, you know, being a symbol of power, is definitely in there as well. Okay, we're going to our next one. I'm sure if we've all seen this one here before.
This mother?
This is Sara Sully and her dog Ponto. This was done in 1848, so actually the exact same, excuse me, around the same time period as James Polk. So a little bit on the same styles of how it was painted. But what do we see here?
Signs of domesticity, flowers, the dog, the country scene.
She looks very content.
Very content, signs of domesticity.
And the lighting.
The lighting is very well done. You can see it, you know, hit her face. It really radiates well.
From the chat, we're noticing that she has a softer look and that she's not looking at the painter.
She's not looking at the painter. That speaks to our first happy hour tour, which was on the gaze. And I would say her gaze is very interesting here.
Okay.
That look of contemplation, of wonder, of what's next.
Also, Jamin mentions that, you know, dogs, also to your the earlier happy hours, that dogs represent loyalty and dedication.
Yeah.
Question that is she wearing black because she's a widow or maybe mourning, you know?
So in fact, that brings up a great point. She was in fact a widow. So Thomas Sully was an American painter, and I know there was like some complication. Sara Sully was married to Thomas Sully's brother, and then he died, and then she ended up loving Thomas Sully. So there was some sort of like complications in love affairs, and she was in fact mourning. So this is a mourning dress, in fact. So that was correct. What about the flowers? What do flowers represent?
Love?
Love,
Nature?
yes. Love, nature, of course.
Beauty.
Beauty, very much so. The colors, you know, so many flowers, excuse me, mean different things. Another really interesting thing about flowers is the passage of time. How flowers, they wilt, they die, and they're beautiful at once, and then they go through that process. And it's really interesting to see here that, you know, you see some that are very vibrant, but others that are not so much. And it's kind of like this passing of time.
We have a question asking if, is she inside or is she outside? What's kind of happening with this setting?
Okay. I would presume that she's outside, or she's in some sort of courtyard, because we can see kind of in the background right here, it doesn't look as though this is a door, but in fact some sort of wall. But what is interesting is it does look like there's a table, so I can see why we can be kind of confused as to where the location is, because this table doesn't look like really an outdoor table that we would necessarily have outdoors. But I would say this was, you know, a staged painting, and I don't even know if it was necessarily outside. Maybe Thomas Sully could have done it while indoors and then just added in the background afterwards.
I think they're both going to be a faded rose tomorrow.
A faded rose tomorrow? Yeah. About both the figures and how like the rose itself in there.
Flowers.
Yeah, and then herself being could be a faded rose. Where's this dog looking? If a dog is loyal towards you, what is he loyal for, though?
Well, whatever she has in her hand may be a munchie.
Yeah, he wants the food. He doesn't even want. He's
Is he
not even
loyal to the food or the person?
Yeah, exactly. As many of us know who have dogs. Once you get food involved, their loyalties change real quick. Any last statements on this piece before we venture on to our last one? Well, without further ado, we have the Kevin Beasley right here.
Whoa.
Whoa. Why do you say whoa? Why is your first initial reaction whoa?
Not interested in zombies.
Very
Zombies.
creepy.
Creepy.
And holes through it. This is a see-through
Holes
person.
through it. Yeah. A person.
Hooded.
Look,
Yeah. In person, that's a really interesting piece. You would stare at it for a long time.
yeah, very much so. So we have a lot of initial reactions of kind of scared, creepy.
Black ghosts,
Mm-hmm.
it's like from the Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah, very
And
unknown.
children ghosts.
Children ghosts. Why children ghosts?
Because they're smaller than the main piece.
The thing's down here.
Oh,
Right, that one.
So as in like pieces of a whole?
Yeah, and this other one has something down here, just about, I guess, knee high. Yeah, down. That's it.
Well, so this is just the detail of this one. So right, this is a blown up part, just so I could show the details.
All right.
Yeah. So we get, when we look at this piece, and when I've taken, whether it be different tour groups here and different children as well, everyone always says that it looks like the Dormentors from Harry Potter. So it looks like these ghost-like figures. It looks scary. It looks as though it has been something emerging from a bog. And it produces this singular figure, but the singular figure is made up of different smaller figures. So when we look at it, think about it in terms of a structural sense. What would happen if you were to remove one of these heads or one of these circular figures right here? What would happen if you remove this black one right down here? What would happen to the sculpture as a whole?
It wouldn't be balanced.
It wouldn't be balanced. What would happen? It would fall apart.
Fall apart, yeah.
Yeah. So each of these little figures, right, makes the entirety of this. And it makes it very unique. Imagine if you were to balance it correctly and you were to add another little, a little one of these heads in there. Would it look the same?
No.
No, it would look different.
It would attract.
Yeah, it would look different, whether it be this main or this top one right here would go lower. You would have to think about it in terms of how could you balance it if you were to add something else in there. So we were looking at portraiture and how
it's balanced without adding anything to it. The density of what's on the left balances what's the child figure on the right.
Correct, right? So each of those individual figures in themselves make up the entirety of it. So if you were to remove one, it wouldn't be the same, whether it be it'd fall apart, or if you were to balance it correctly, it just would not look the same. It would always be different.
What does it look like from the back?
So the way this looks like is it has all these different heads and they're all around. So just imagine a 360 degree of all these different like figures all around. If that makes sense. It's like,
is this on exhibit right now?
Yes, it is. It's in contemporary 1. Wow. So if you go up the elevator, second floor, right when you come out, it's hard to miss. It's big. Really, really.
Did you talk about the materials? Like, what is it?
Yeah, for sure. So the materials which it's made out of house dresses, kaftans, t-shirts, do-rags, and then it has resin on it. And so the resin gives it this wet.
I go into
like,
another one at 7 o'clock.
So it has this wet look to it. And it's kind of hard to see in the pictures, but in person, you're able to see that it looks as though these like t-shirts and do-rags were kind of dipped in a type of water or glue-like substance. And it makes it look wet. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like a slime, kind of looks slimy. I don't know what it feels like, to be honest, because, you know, obviously we can't touch it, but what the texture would feel like.
But
Let's touch it.
Go ahead, Johanna.
I said in person, it has that kind of glassy feel and look to it. Yeah.
It's very similar to if you were to get glue and glue were to dry. It looks very similar to that. So that's what I would presume it to be like. So these are all the different, you know, fabrics that are made up of it. And each of the fabrics, whether it be house dresses or t-shirts, symbolize something to this artist. How in the previous portraits, these are all symbolisms to a particular figure, right? Versus, does this look like an actual person or a portrait of something?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
And in fact, it is. So it's not like our actual portraits of something, you know, very humanoid, but it in fact represents Kevin Beasley's life. And it represents who he is as a person and how each of these individual figures in his life allow him to be who he is as a whole.
And it says it in the title. The title is wonderful.
Exactly, right?
Oh, the title is wonderful.
Mm-hmm. If I was standing alone, I wouldn't stand it at all. So
Yeah.
Similar to what we were talking about, how if we were to have removed one of the heads, what would happen to it? What if we are to remove a person in our lives? What would happen to us? Would we be the same people we are today? What if it was something so hard? We would fall apart. We wouldn't be able to stand at all. It's a really, really wonderful metaphor.
Oh, it's wonderful. This is my favorite.
I agree. And I love how everyone looks at it and they all are like, wow, this looks scary. It looks creepy. But when you take the moment to understand it, to look at it, it becomes something really, truly beautiful and wonderful, and how we can really relate it to ourselves. And it's something really touching.
Bravo, Mark.
Sherry's adding that it kind of reminds them of the Pietà. That's Michelangelo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or no, was that David? But just kind of thinking about that, just like that beautiful, sad almost moment of the Pietà.
Yeah, of course. It's sad, but it's like it holds that power, it holds that significance in one's life. And, you know, those are the moments that change us and that really make us who we are. So it's like we have to go through these processes. We have to go through these hard times. We have to go through the sadness and to be the people we are today. And I mean, if Kevin Beasley, you know, were the sculpture, it was like each individual person was there to help him become this entire sculpture. And how if he didn't have this one right here with this red, this kind of like flowery dress, he wouldn't be the same person. What if it was somebody so important to him? He wouldn't be standing, would he? He would fall over. So it really, really allows us to think about what it is that we're seeing.
The most not important, but the most striking thing that I've heard with discussion of this thing was the one word, Pietà.
Yeah. What was the word? I'm sorry?
Pietà.
Pietà?
Pietà.
Oh, Pietà. Okay. Yeah. Speaking to that piece. Yeah. Yeah, it's very true, and it's really interesting, and allows us to think about our lives and how art went from depicting a noble figure or a mythological figure to now representing an artist's life, representing somebody, and this is how they represent themselves, and this is what is important to them. And this is Kevin Beasley showing who he is and how each of those individual figures really made him who he was.
It does have a religious feel to it, I think.
It does. It does. Yeah.
It does. I think it does.
I think it's phenomenal.
Of course. Yeah. It's really wonderful. And maybe Kevin Beasley wanted that, and maybe he was religious, or maybe he isn't. And maybe it's our own interpretations of whether it be we are religious people or we have that religious kind of like idea ingrained in our minds. And this is why when we look at it, we get those sort of feelings from it. So it's really interesting how we can have such similar viewpoints to what it is we're seeing, but also such different viewpoints. So it really allows us to try to understand art and to try to take in everyone else's opinions and really learn so much to art and how there's no direct meaning to what it is that we're seeing. And
Well, thank you very much. This has been wonderful.
yeah. And any final questions?
From Ben, he asked which people did he choose as the ones he was representing in his sculpture.
Yeah.
Can I go for it?
Yeah, go for it.
So for this one, he used kind of like found objects and things around his house and things that his usually family has. But I know that in his larger scale of works, he works with a variety of materials, including hijabs, and he does performance pieces with all of this as well. So I would highly recommend y'all check out his Art 21 video, because it really shows where he's kind of coming from and his process in making these really, because as y'all imagine, these are hard to make and to balance and to dip in resin several times. So it's a lot about process, but using materials, found materials specifically.
Yeah, I mean, if you get the chance, you can just go on YouTube and you just type in Kevin Beasley, and it really shows him working in his studios and how just difficult some of these processes must be to do, and it's crazy. It's really neat. If you have the time, right? Go check something out, learn a little something. So, but anything else? Is there any last final questions before we wrap it up?
Before we leave, I would like to plug in our next event. So this coming Tuesday, we have an artist conversation between one of our curators, Dr. Yenshi Lerman-Tan, and a local San Antonio artist, Hiromi Stringer. It's really fascinating. Her work dives into what a museum is. And I was speaking with her today, and she said the most interesting thing, that 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2. And that kind of thought process is what she is diving into in her works. And I really hope that you all join us for that. It's this Tuesday. Please check out our website. I too will be the chat overlord over there as well. So if you guys could just look at that and see if you're interested, that would be really cool.
What time, please?
It's Tuesday at 6.
6 p.m.
Tuesday.
There's a registration required, and that information's on our site.
All right, thank you.
Well, no, thank you. So I would like to
wonderful, Amy.
thank you all for coming, and we really appreciate having you all here today. And it was great talking to you.
Thank you,
Hope to see you
Mark.
for the next one. Yeah, of course. We appreciate it. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your day, okay? Thank you.